So, welcome back to the Backlog Podcast. I'm David Gumley, Managing Director here at Adaptivate. And today we're going to focus on something that sits at the center of almost every transformation, but still widely misunderstood and often undone, and that's change management. Because right now, organizations aren't just running transformation programs, but they're operating in a constant state of flux and a constant state of change. They're either restructuring, they're introducing AI and new technologies. They're trying to move faster, often with leaner teams. But despite all of that, they still struggle to actually land the change. So the question is why? And more importantly, what do organisations need to do differently? So to unpack that today, I'm joined by my colleague Poppy Lucas, who works closely with leaders and organisations, helping them navigate transformation and helping them embed change in a way that actually sticks. So Poppy, great to have you here.
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here.
Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground. So there's lots of talk about transformation, all over the place just now. But what feels different at this moment in time is the pace and, I guess, intensity of change that we're seeing. What are you seeing that organisations are actually struggling with at the moment?
Yeah, I think, as you touched on before, it's a couple of things. I think there's definitely that pressure to simplify, reduce cost, but still try and accelerate delivery at the moment. And we're definitely seeing that drive of AI, new tools, and that acceleration really coming through. And I think some of the biggest things that we're seeing is people aren't resisting the change. They're just overwhelmed by it. I think there's huge change saturation, so multiple initiatives happening at the same time without really understanding what that looks like and what that means for them. And with that shifting priorities, that leads to change fatigue. And I think that's why you're starting to see change not being embedded as well as we'd like to see it.
And do you think that's because most organisations don't have the structures in place or the mindsets to, I guess, design for that, to actually achieve that?
I think it's a couple things. I think we're designing well. So when you actually look at operating models, org design, strategy, we always design those very well. But when it actually comes to executing and delivering on it, adoption and change management is all about behaviors. It's all about capabilities. So actually, if people don't know what it means for them, they're really not able to then adopt the change. And if habits are staying the same, if we're not seeing that shift, if leaders aren't able to actually drive some of this moving forward, it makes it a lot harder to stick.
You and I were getting a coffee the other day, and you mentioned a stat that you'd heard from somewhere that I was kind of blown away with. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's a stat from Philippa Lally at UCL, and it takes around 66 days for a new behavior to become habitual. And that's actually, when you think about it, just a simple behavior. So when you're talking about complex ways of working changes and shifts in technology, likely that's going to take a lot longer. So actually, when you're looking at change, it should actually be embedded as part of a long-term inbuilt capability, not just an add-on to a program.
Yeah, okay. So organisations that we're talking to, every day are telling us that they're investing in transformation.
Yeah.
And making some large investments as well.
Yeah.
But we're still seeing a lot of these initiatives or programs of work just aren't delivering the outcomes that most leaders are expecting.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, why do you still think change is failing?
I still think change is being seen as very much comms, training, engagement, and kind of tick boxes that organizations need to do. And a bolt-on that change is just added on at the end of a program or towards the end of a program once the design's been made and once we're ready to kind of then implement. Whereas actually change needs to be brought in all the way in from the beginning. It's actually the starting point of are our leaders aligned on the change? Is there a narrative that's driving forward so people can get on board with the change and actually then kind of support teams and such moving forward? And it's building change capability within an organization. So really then working within organizations to drive the change, not only change within change teams, so change leads that you have naturally as part of programs, but actually starting to look more around building change capability in leaders, in managers, in broader teams. So you're actually then seeing people drive it for longer across a continual pace rather than just seeing transformation as a start and an end point.
So with that, what are some of the, I guess, frameworks or even just conversations that you're having with our clients currently to move from, a tick box exercise, if you like, to something that's actually going to, deliver real impact and change?
Yeah. So the very first thing that we look at is actually leadership alignment. So conducting executive level type interviews and actually then digesting some of those, synthesizing some of those results to build a case for change. Why are we changing? What are the success measures behind the change? And actually getting all of those leaders aligned in that one room so we can then start to drive some of this forward. Once we've got that alignment, it's very much then working with teams on actually what are the multiple initiatives you've got on at the moment. So not just the single program that we may be in there to work on. It's actually thinking broader to actually then start to look at impact matrices across programs, looking at that compounding change effect. And then we can actually then really start to deliver change in a more positive way, building communications where there's synthesis of all of these different programs into one. So we can actually then see people actually understanding what this means for me and making it more fun as well. So using AI tools, accelerating some of that forward, creating videos, making it seem a bit more, how does this actually change for me and what does this mean for me?
So let's bring AI into the conversation. You just mentioned it there, because it's becoming a major driver of a lot of transformations that we're seeing.
Yeah.
What role do you see AI play when it comes to change agents and change management?
Positive, but it does take a little bit of time. I think we're really using AI to accelerate delivery and development of deliverables, which I think is really great for us. But I also think in terms of how we're actually delivering change moving forward, we can start to use AI agents to build videos, actually create narratives and make it more fun, make it more engaging, make it a bit more relatable to everyone's day to day. So you can actually then start to kind of see change in real life rather than just being kind of sent out a message online, and people can actually then start to feel it, which actually when you create it more as that lived experience, people then get on board and actually get excited by it. And
are we seeing that sort of excitement from our clients?
Definitely. I think it depends on where they're at in the stage of their maturity at the moment. But I think as we're starting to build some of these into some of our practices day to day, we're seeing really some of the benefit of building this moving forward.
So other than, I guess, personalizing sort of communication at scale and, potentially better understanding employee sentiment with AI, can we actually use AI to identify where change isn't landing?
Yeah. So some of the real impacts of why change isn't landing sometimes is because ways of working aren't being adopted. We're not seeing that change in behavior as well, which is kind of really critical. So we're actually starting to use AI to do a bit more of that diagnostic and analysis to really support kind of where is that change not being adopted? Is it some of the impacts that we need to go in a bit more detail on, some of the mitigations? Is there some additional train the trainer approaches that we might need to do to kind of really build it and make the organizations own their change? So we're really there to support those organizations actually creating and building that internal capability moving forward. And AI is really helping us to kind of do some of that initial analysis work as well.
Because I guess you could argue that the more technology and digital aspects to ways of working that you introduce, I guess the more behavior needs to shift.
Definitely. And it's an enabler as well. Kind of strategy and the technology and tools behind it are all enabling us to drive change faster and move quicker. But it's also one of those inhibitors to actually accelerating on change if you're not actually understanding how it can benefit you and what are the positive impacts by it as well.
When you're talking to clients currently, what are they asking for more of when it comes to change typically?
I think it's a difficult one. I think there's a couple of things. They're definitely wanting more support in understanding what it actually means for the impacted stakeholders, and actually who are the impacted stakeholders. I think sometimes you go into programs and they've already got a stakeholder analysis list. They already know and have identified who those impacted stakeholders are. And when you go into a bit more depth and detail, and when you start to look end to end at some of these programs and the impacting processes, you're actually uncovering a lot more stakeholders that need to be either informed or brought in on the change. So I think that causes a little bit of complexity, and that's kind of where we're also supporting organizations. But I think a lot of it is there are so many multiple initiatives happening at the same time, all impacting the same stakeholders. So it's actually going in to support organizations and actually bringing that view around what is the narrative that we're wanting to drive forward, and actually then supporting that and actually pulling that into a lot of our communications, engagement tools moving forward to help them.
So if we were to sort of bring all that together, sort of end-to-end sort of change management program, like what does good change management look like today for you?
It is all around for me. It's behavior and capability change. Change management is behavior and capability, really. So I think for organizations to really land change management well, it's really the focal point of building change management capability within the organization, seeing it as an organizational muscle, because change is continuous. Transformation isn't just that start and end that we used to see. It's a continual drive, and we will continue to see this moving forward, especially with the pace of new technology growth, AI. And I think it's actually we're here to help organizations kind of initially get in, do that diagnostic, understanding what they need, and starting to coach and build that capability internally so they can then manage it moving forward. And I think that's the core differentiator for how organizations can actually then conduct change well.
Are there any sectors that you're seeing doing change better than others?
That's a difficult one. I think not necessarily. I think we're working with a large rail operator at the moment, and it's complex because they've got multiple different external customers, operators, shareholders. So I think when you've got organizations that actually have not just the internal stakeholders that they need to focus on, but actually all those external considerations as well, that's where complexity drives harder change to manage essentially as well. So I think it just depends on those organizations that have just that slightly more complex stakeholder landscape.
So if we summarize and start to sort of wrap this up, what I'm hearing from you is that change it's no longer something that organizations treat as secondary to transformation.
Yeah.
It is actually the transformation itself. Change
Correct.
is the transformation.
Yeah.
And as things like AI, accelerate the pace of change, organizations that succeed will be the ones that build the capability to really continuously adapt. And not just periodically transform.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're an avid fan of podcasts.
Yes.
And listen to podcasts regularly. What are you currently listening to at the moment?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple. So I'm listening to Zoe. So Zoe is a relatively new organization actually that focuses in on running large scale studies on the gut microbiome. And so I've actually found some of those really interesting in terms of gut health, actually understanding what foods are medicine and what kind of really helps to drive hormonal benefits and concepts such as that. And I also love to listen to The Diary of a CEO. Some of his are a bit more interesting than others, but I do find the conversation and debates around it, I just find it quite relaxing. I like to listen to it when I'm working and just on the train and just kind of in my house, just to kind of understand and learn a bit more about day-to-day things.
And any particular themes or topics, The Diary of a CEO, that's either resonated or that you've taken into your day-to-day here at Adaptivate?
Yeah, honestly, it actually just tends to be health, wellness, lifestyle, work-life balance, those types of concepts. I really like to make sure that I have a really great work-life balance, because that actually helps me to work really productively within the time that I actually have in the office. I think that's actually one of the biggest things is when it's moving to Adaptivate, we're in the office every single day. And I think at first I was a bit afraid to do that. And actually now I'm in it, I couldn't imagine doing anything different. So actually being able to build a really good routine that works for me, but still having time to exercise, eat well, cook, and do all the things I love as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today, Poppy. Really appreciate the conversation. Thanks to everyone for listening. And we look forward to seeing you back on the Backlog Podcast next time.